Hello, in today's video I want to have a look at problems that occur when trying to do foiling and what the solutions or not are. So I've been experimenting with doing various bits of foiling and some of them have worked out better than others. So one of the things that can cause a problem with foiling, if you look on this, you can see the foiling is quite patchy. Now I've actually made a note on this that I didn't use any card shims. Okay, so I'm going to go through and replicate some of these and see what happens. And I have so many little samples here. Ah, there we are. And on this one I've left the foil attached. I don't know if you can see any foiling on there, or just a bit of a dent. Anyway, this is what happened when I didn't actually allow the hot foil stamp to heat up. So let's have a look at what we're going to do. So I've got various types of cardstock here, so we can try out and see what works, what doesn't, and try and find a way forward in this maze of things called foiling. Now the first thing is the Gopress. Now mine's been plugged in for a while. Let's bring it over, oh, so you can see the light. So when you first, you can see that's flashing, it's flashing red. I know the colour doesn't show up well on video, and then it's just gone to a steady green. If I press it again, it goes back to a steady red. Now when you first plug your Gopress in, you'll have a steady red, and you can see just next to the light, just to this side of it, there's button there. That's actually a power symbol, so you press that, and if it's not hot the light will start to flash, and mine's been on for a while, so mine's just gone back to green. Okay, so before you do anything, you put your Gopress on and you press the button and you let the light flash away for 5 to 10 minutes, and then it will go green, and then you're ready to go. So now it's worth taking time with your card and foil. I'm using the Couture Creations foil that came with the Gopress. Okay, so take different foils, different issues. Couture Creations foils are very consistent and therefore very good value for money because you don't waste so much. So that's what I'm testing with. So I'm going to cut a length of for about 6 centimeters long. I'm going to do this in that direction. I'm just going to cut that, and then I'm going to cut this into small pieces because I don't need a lot of foil for testing purposes. I'm just going to cut some small pieces, cut it into about 4. Okay, so I've got my foil. Now I need to find my card. Is that it there? No, that's not it there. I'm going to pause the camera a second while I find the card. Okay, so I've got my card. Now this started off as an A4 sheet. That's 129.6 millimeters by 210 millimeters, so 21 by nearly 30 centimeters, an A4 sheet. So I've cut it down into 4 A6 pieces, and then I'm going to cut that down further for my testing. Now my Gopress is sitting next to me, occasionally going back to flashing red and then coming back to green. That's okay, just to sit there warming up. Okay, so you can see I'm cutting this down into quite small pieces. Okay, now my die cutting machine is in the room behind me. It happens to be a Todo die cutting machine, but people tell me that I've got it set the same as it, you know, something like a Sizzix Big Shot, Cut or Bug, the Go cut and emboss machine. They roll things through in exactly the same way as I've got mine set up. So I can't bring that in front of the camera, it's too big and heavy, but I will go live to it and come back. It's literally a few steps away. And please excuse the noise it makes. which is just a vibration. It's not really creaking that loudly. So this cardstock is my go-to cardstock when I'm card making. It's not thick enough for card bases, but it's great for die cutting and toppers and just about everything else. It's a super smooth but not coated 250 GSM card, and I pay about 8p a sheet for it. So that's what I'm going to use because that's my go-to card, and then I'm going to see what happens with other cardstock. And it's good to find a card that you know is reliable and that you can just keep in stock. Okay, so without further ado, let's talk about hot foil stamps. Now, I have a selection here. Oops, don't need that. I don't need that piece of tape. Right, so I have a selection of hot foil stamps, and I've got some Todo ones. I wanted to pick hot foil stamps that have got some flat areas on them, because sometimes if you're just testing with fine lines you get good results, and then when you try and do a flat area, because that needs a bit more pressure, you don't get a good result. So they're Todo brand hot foil stamps from Create and Craft. I've got a Couture Creations hot foil stamp, and I've got a Craft Stash own brand one. Now they vary in width, in depth rather, well, thickness. So the Todo one is the thickest at 1.46 millimeters. The Couture Creations is 0.19, and the Craft Stash is even thinner at 1.15. So you go, numbers, what did you say? What does it mean? Well, the difference in thickness is more or less a sheet of cardstock, so one Shims thickness. So when we talk about shim, I've got a pile of shims here. These are just pieces of card that I've used over and over again, some of them with failed experiments on them. They're just sheets of 250 GSM cards, so just my normal card that I use. That one's an A5 sheet folded in half, so that's what we call a double shim because it's two thicknesses. And then I've got another 3 here that I can possibly work with. They're all the same. So you just, when we say add a card shim, that's what we mean. So let's get some foiling done. So the first pitfall that people fall into is not letting their hot foil stamp warm up. They go, right, the machine's good to go, I'm going to choose my hot foil stamp, put some foil on, away we go. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Now because I want to do that quickly, like you do when you're trying to get things done, I'm not going to talk in between. I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to put a hot foil stamp on the bed of the Gopress. I'm going to put some foil on. Oh, I have some foil on that I've already cut, and a piece of card, and I'm going to go and roll it, and I'm going to show you what happens. So I'm just going to wait for my light to go back to green because it's decided to flash red. This is quite hot to touch because it's got nice and warm. Okay, Gopress, open, hot foil stamp, piece of foil, piece of card. Oh, should I put some shims in? I'll put 2 shims in. We'll see what happens. 2 shims, and off I go. There we go, and I'm back. Okay, so the base wasn't off the electric part, the heating, the base plate for long. Okay, now somewhere, I pick and lift. Let's, well, actually I don't want to move the hot foil stamp, I just want to pick that up off of there. I'm going to leave the hot foil stamp where it is. We'll see what that's done. Ah, there we are, you see. So I started peeling, I thought, oh, maybe that did work, but then in the middle of the hot foil stamp it hasn't, because that area hadn't had a chance to get hot. Okay, so that's sitting there now. So if I now do exactly the same using the same shim, now that it's had chance for the hot foil stamp to warm up as well as the machine, we'll see what happens. Machine. Foil. Card. Shims. Close. Okay, so shims, I'm just carefully picking those up with my fingernails. And my card, and again I'm going to leave that where it is. Okay, let's see what's happened this time. So there. So now that the hot foil stamps had a chance to warm up, that's foiled really nicely using two shims. Okay, the other issue people have is not having enough pressure, and then the other one is too much pressure. So that's nice and warm. I'm gonna cut a small piece of card again. I'm gonna take a really small piece of card. Okay, because there's no point in having the card much bigger than my foil. Okay, now I'm going to do it again. I'm not going to use the card shims on top. So that should reduce the pressure that's applied when I'm foiling. So I'm using that same hot foil stamp, so it's nicely warmed up. We saw that in the previous foiling. So, foil, cardstock. Close the lid, and I can feel the lid up against the everything, so I'm going to roll that. Okay, so no shims on this, so pick that up. Put that back on its base to stay warm. So let's see what we got this time. So I didn't have any card shims on this, so not so much pressure. Now I can look at the foil and I can kind of see the impression in it. I don't know whether or not this will have been enough. Well, it is in some laces. Okay, so you can see on the waste foil, I hope that there's bits still there. Maybe you can't, but definitely you can see on the card that there are bits of the centre bit missing. Okay, and again, where you've got narrow areas, the pressure doesn't get spread out as much, it gets more concentrated, so more of it goes through the foil and it presses it into the card. Where you've got flat areas, that's where if you've not got enough pressure, it'll really show. Okay, so not enough pressure there. So that was no shims. So as I say, eventually I've built up and I find my optimum is 2 shims. So if this was me, I'll try with none. I might try with 1, because if you have too many shims you get lots of overfoiling. So let me cut. Oh no, I've got one more piece of foil, one more piece of card. So you saw before with 2 shims on that card earlier, I think. Did I do that to start with? There's that one and that one. Yeah, I did the first 2 with 2 shims. So one of them it wasn't heated, the next one it was. Okay, and then I've taken the shims out and got that. So if I try increasing my number of shims and show you what happens, I'm going to go up quite a lot to try and show you how you go too far the other way. So, nice warm hot foil stamp, which is covered. Piece of foil. Now, what did I do there? The rest of my shims. So, if I go, you know, I've got 5 in total there. So let's put them all on and see what happens. Now, that's a lot of shims. Now, if you try this and you go to put it through your die cutting machine and the handle is really, really stiff, like really stiffer than when you die cut, stop, don't force it, take out some of the shims, okay? It shouldn't feel any stiffer than when you die cut. Okay, I should also note it doesn't need to feel as stiff as when you die cut, but you don't want to go any harder than that. Okay, let's pick that up and close that. Now, I'm also going to change my hot foil stamp. Okay, so I want to change, because the Todo ones are the thickest ones, so I'm going to change to the Craft Stash one that's the thinnest. Okay, and I'm going to put that on. Okay, so I've just put that on there, just a little hot foil stamp. And if you haven't got a small hot foil stamp, use a bigger one, but you don't need to foil the whole thing while you're testing. You can just do an area of it. Okay, so 5 shims. Okay, and on that's actually foiled really nicely, but on other cardstock and with other foil I might get over foiling. I'm just going to take my glasses off and have a really close look at that. Now, I think this is one of the advantages of the Todo hot foil stamps, is that they are so deeply etched that you don't tend to get overfoiling, because when you press the card into them you still don't get areas that you don't want foiled actually touching anything hot. Okay, so that's that. So I've changed my hot foil stamp and that's warmed up, so I'm going to go with the same setting, my 2 shims. Let's go back to just my double shim, my 1 piece of card folded in half. Okay, and I've now got a thinner hot foil stamp and I need to cut some more foil. Now I've got an area of my foil here that's been damaged because I haven't put it away carefully, so I'm just going to have to kind of cut that off, because that's going to confuse things, because it's got crumpled and there are bits of foil missing from the surface. So always keep your foil carefully rolled up and where it can't get damaged. Okay, so let's cut a piece of foil off. So I'm just using tiny bits of foil. I'm not using a lot for this testing because I'm very conscious that people don't want to waste their foil or their card. Okay. So I'm still using my normal thin card, and then I'm going to try out some different cards in a moment or two. Right, so put the foil over, foil over the hot foil stamp without dropping it, without burning my fingers. There we go. And my card, my 2 shims, close the lid, runs the die cutting machine. Okay, and there's that, leave that on there. So, with my Todo hot foil stamp, 2 card shims was enough, and 5 was okay. But if I peel this back, you can see I've got chunks of foil missing from the image, middle of that image, and it's not particularly pressed into the card. So, the answer for that is to use more shims. So let me just find some more card and I will try that. Okay, so cut myself some more pieces of this same card. Now the Gopress has decided it needs to warm up. So what I'm going to do is add in a 3rd shim. So I've got my double one. And I can have a 3rd one. I'm going to tuck it inside so they all stay together. It makes it easier for me to pick it up. Okay. Foil, card, shims, close, die cutting machine. Okay, there it is. Let's move this out of the way. So I'm always putting my Gopress back in the base, and when I do that, usually the red light comes on and starts flashing. So it's keeping warm, ready for the next run. So let's see what this has done. There we go. So yeah, that has pulled quite nicely this time. Okay. Now, this is a not such deeply etched hot foil stamp, so I could try and see what happens if I really crank out the number of shims in that. But I'm already on an extra one to start with, so maybe not. Okay, so that's now got enough pressure, and it had enough time to heat up. So let's try some different sorts of card. So I've been looking at card. I've got all sorts here. Now the card I'm using really varies in its weight. So I've got, this is an off-cut of card I use for card bases. It's a 300 GSM smooth card rather than the 250 GSM, which is this stuff. So it's a slightly different colour, but it's quite a bright white card, and the surface doesn't feel quite as smooth as that. So let's try this. So I'm just going to cut a small piece. I'm already using an off-cut. Cut this off when I made a box. Piece of foil. Don't think I've got quite enough foil there. In fact, I'm going to cut the foil in half. Use even less. Okay. And because this card is slightly thicker, I certainly shouldn't need any more shims. So let's see. So there's my 3 shims. I'll be as quick as I can. So that's 3 shims, which was fine on the thin card. There's that. Leave that to stay hot. Okay, now what's this done? So yeah, that's not foiled quite so well on that card. So I think I would probably need a bit more pressure on that card. So let's try that. Yeah. I'm not worried about the bit at the bottom here that's missing. That's where the foil was too small. But can you see there's some spots here that are missing? Yeah, so. Foil. That really is a small piece of foil. Card. And I want 1 extra shim in there. So when I'm not filming, I put my Gopress back on its base before I unload it. So that's why I keep wanting to put it straight back in there. So there it goes back in. Let's see this time. So the stamp was bigger than the foil, but this should tell us. Ah, yeah, that's a nice finish. Okay, so that's using the thinnest of the hot foil stamps I've got. I'm going to switch the Couture Creations one, because that's kind of in the middle. So I'm going to swap those over. So I'm going to use this nice Happy Birthday that came with my Gopress and foil. Okay, so I was kind of preparing for this video yesterday, and I thought, right, I need to figure out what it goes wrong and show what to do about it. So I'm going through these samples here. That only had one shim, so that didn't quite work. That Sheena stamping card with 3 shims, that's okay. That Sheena stamping card with 2 shims, that's some different foil. And I kind of pulled out of my stash, oh, that Sheena card with only 2 shims. And that was Sheena card with 3 shims. So there, the foiling is a bit patchy with that foil, and with that foil, and there with the extra shim, that foil was okay. That's not a Couture Creations foil, so that one's a bit more variable. I kind of had a rummage and pulled out all sorts of bits of card and tried different things. Now, one of the things I was trying to do, now this is on my normal smooth 250 GSM card I use, and I was sort of doing some foiling in stages. I did these 3 holly leaves first. I thought, oh, that's great, and then I thought, I need some more on here. So I put 1, 2, 3 down on the Gopress at the same time. And as you can see, these 2 did not foil properly, and that is because that's a bigger surface area. There's more points for the pressure to hit. It's a bit like when you're die cutting, when you've got an intricate die, and they talk about, you know, it's not the size of the die but the number of cutting points. Well, it's the number of places the pressure has to be applied, and because these 2 were next to each other as the roller came across, rather than this one in its own down here, there just wasn't enough pressure in all the places. So that's what went wrong there. So this morning I've had more of a rummage and found more different sorts of card to try out. So, and I've not tried them out. I just thought we'll have a go and see what happens. Okay, so first thing I want to do is get some of my smooth 250 GSM card and my let's do 3 shims, because it's the Couture Creations hot foil stamp, so that was a bit thinner than the Todo one. Okay, now that's had time to warm up. The light's gone back to green. Again, I'm not doing the whole thing, so I'm not using lots of card and foil. I'm just going to put that across there and cover the foil with the card and put my shims in place. And I'm going to go and roll that. That's kind of going to be my control, because that's a card I know I can foil on nicely. Now, as I rolled that through my die cutting machine, which is a manual machine, so I can feel how stiff the handle is, as I got to the area where the hot foil stamp is, the handle got a little bit stiffer, so I could feel that there's some work going on. It wasn't as stiff as when I hit an intricate die. Okay, so, but I could feel it was there. So that, I think, is a good indication that the pressure's right, or in the right kind of area. So I'll pick that up and I'll put this back on the base and slide it in. Make sure it's gone in fully and the light's flashing red. If the light stays flashing green, you haven't pushed it in properly. Right, so let's peel this back. Okay, now that's patchy. that is quite patchy. Yeah, that isn't a good result. So that's obviously going to need yet another shim. Okay, so let's do 4 shims and make sure we know where we are with this hot foil stamp. And my smooth card, which is this piece. And I need some more foil. I've really only used a few inches of foil here. I've not used a great deal. I'm cutting a piece. I'm cutting a section off. Okay, put that to one side. Foil. So you can see it's not covering the whole hot foil stamp. But I don't need to see whether or not things are going to work. Put those together. So that's now 4 shims. Die cutting machine. Shims, card, back on the base. So I can see that's quite well pressed into the card. And there I have complete foiling. I'll show them both together so you can see the difference. So bottom one is my first attempt where I only had 3 shims. My top one is 4 shims. So what I tend to do when I've got success is I keep that sample and I'll write 4 shims and maybe Couture Creations stamp and foil. Okay, and if I want to write more, I can always write on the back. Okay, so I'll keep that so that I know that in that configuration that works. Okay, on that type of card. And yeah, and this is 250 GSM smooth card. There we are. Okay, so let's move on to something different. So, oh, this is a piece of adorable scoreable, which is supposed to be pretty much the best thing for foiling on. So, let's see how we get on with that. Now, it's much thicker than my 250 GSM card. I had a list somewhere. I've buried it on the desk under all these little bits of foil. So, adorable scoreable is 0.35mm thick, whereas my 250 GSM smooth card is only 0.25, so it's 1/10 of a millimetre thicker. It can make all the difference when you're doing things like this. So again, I'm not going to do a huge area. So let's see how this works. My shims, I'm going to use the same number of shims. Close the lid, die cutting machine. Now, 1/10 of a millimetre doesn't sound like very much, but I could feel that my die cutting machine, as I rolled across the handle, was stiffer to turn when I was in the area where the hot foil stamp is. And yeah, I'd say that has foiled really nicely. It hasn't overfoiled, but it has foiled really nicely. Okay, so that's that one. What else should we try? I've got here some cards it's like a watercolour card. It is textured. I don't know if you can see that on the camera if I bend it. I don't know if you can see the texture. Okay, so I'm going to try a piece of that. And I'm sure I did measure this. Did I write it on it? I'm sure I measured this. No, can't find the measurement. I'll turn up on the desk in a minute, I'm sure. Right, so, shall I use a bigger piece of foil? Yes, use a big piece of foil. So I'm going to use it on the textured side because I think that's the side I would want to be using if I was making a card. I'm going to use the same shims. And let's see what happens. So far, it's been a very successful trial. But this card, you can possibly see the texture more now that it's foiled. So can you see the texture in the foil there? Actually, let me get some ink here. Got an ink pad. And the other piece of the card. Maybe that shows it up better. Not sure it does. Anyway, let's see what we got. Okay, so initially you think, oh yes, okay, but then you look closely and you'll see that there's bits missing, and that's quite common with a textured card because you're just not, because of the texture, you can't press the foil into it in all the places that it needs to go. Okay, so that would be what I'd expect with that card. Copier paper, let's try that. Oh, I need some more foil. So I'll leave that where it is. I'll cut some more foil. I've never tried foiling on copier paper. foil. Now, it's reasonably good quality copier paper, but it's copier paper. Same number of shims. Let's see what happens. Well, the foil has stuck to it. Don't know how good the quality will be. Yeah, and again, it's quite patchy, particularly in the middle here. Okay, so I find that you need something that almost that the foil can press into slightly. So that was copier paper. I have got some various papers and cards. Now, this is from a pad of coloured scrapbooking papers. It's I had a piece actually wrote them. I think it's about 0.24 millimeters thick. It's a little bit thinner than the card I use. So I've got a smaller piece of that. I've got a smaller piece there, so let's give that a try. Again, small piece of foil, small piece of card, and if you're die cutting, you've ended up a small offcut of card when you die cut something from. It's worth keeping them to test your foil on. Test your foiling on rather than just the foil. Right, I'll use those same shims. Back in a moment. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this because people actually ask, what's the best card for foiling on? And my answer to that is, it depends what you want to do with the card once you've foiled it and what you're making. So I might want a dark background. So that's not quite. I think I'm going to try that again with another card shim, because that's nearly there, but not quite. Let me take a piece of this. Just going to use this crooked piece, I think. No, I'll use the big piece. Let's see if we can get this whole thing. Let's splurge on this one, because it's a really nice colour combination. Okay, so I'm not going to leave my foil that wide because that really would be wasteful. I'm going to cut it in half that way. Keep that piece for the next experiment. So, oops, foil. I think I've got enough here to cover the, yep, covers the hot foil stamp. Put the card on. And I'm going to use all 5 layers of shim. that really is kind of the limit. Okay, so again, die cutting machine, I could feel the stiffness in the handle. Wasn't quite as much as with an intricate die, but was nearly that much. So just be aware. What's that? There. So there we are with the one more shim. So here it, I'll make sure the camera's focused on that. So you can see in the curly bit, the B here, there's some foil missing, and on the T, if I get my pencil in the shot. Okay, so there's some foil missing here, and in the on the Y here, you can see there it's not really nicely foiled. But on this one, it really has. So it's worth adding that extra shim, doing a small experiment, and then going through it on the large piece of card. Okay, so if I want dark purple card, and it's quite a nice finish on it, this card, then that's the best card for me to foil on. If I want to be able to just foil without having to think too much, then I'll, you know, quite often I'll just use my go-to white card. There's all sorts of types of card and paper you can foil onto, and some that you can't. Foil and satin boards are interesting. So there's a piece of foil cardstock, and from the same supplier in the same range, there's a satin version of it. Okay, the colours are almost identical. This is from Create and Craft. So I've foiled on the foil board, no problems. I've had some problem with the satin board. So let's try that. So let me do the satin board first. I've got some foil here. I'm just going to cut a small piece of this because that's it. Right. And then the question is, how many shims? I think I'm going to go back to 4. I think. Well, maybe I'll use lots of shims. Because the worst that can happen is I'll get too much foiling. And yeah, that can happen too. So that, put all the shims in again. There's that. Now I've already written on the back of this piece of card that it's 0.34mm thick. So it's quite a thick piece of card. Oh, there we are. It's on the satin board. I'm not sure that hasn't missed a few areas. Let me just have a close look. Yeah, I'm at that age where I have to take my glasses off to look closely. Yeah, if you look at the top of the D and the cross of the Y, that hasn't folded perfectly on that, but there's certainly lots of pressure there. So that's interesting. So let me try the foiled cardstock. It's almost the same, but it's a slightly different finish on it. And it's only 0.31mm thick. So foil, card, all of the shims, die cutting machine. Now, that's one of the reasons you need shim, because the foil overhung, so that has ended up on my shim. And that is a much better result. Okay, so we use the same number of shims, the same foil, the same hot foil stamp, but the finish on the foil on that cardstock is much better than on that. Okay, so that's foil board and satin board. What else have I got? I've got a piece of this. This is like a bronze finish on it. It's not quite a pearlescent, but it's not quite a matte. It's quite a strange finish. So cut some more foil. Now, one of the other problems you can get is what's called overfoiling, and that's where you get foiling where you don't want it, and that's not happened today. And I think the main reason that's not happened today is because I'm putting the foil and the card on a preheated hot foil stamp and rolling it straight away, so that areas of the card that aren't going to be foiled aren't getting a chance to get hot. So my scrap of card. Yeah, let's stick with all of the shims and see what happens. That's quite thick card, so I'll see how stiff that feels. I might stop and take one out. Shims card. Okay, so it's kind of full, but there's lots of bits missing. I couldn't really add any more pressure to that. So can you see here? So that's not a good card to foil on. And that surprises me because it's got a really smooth surface, but it's kind of a strange finish on it. But yeah, that's not giving me a really good result. It's got bits missing all over the place. So especially down there. Oh, see where I'm pointing? There we go. Okay, so one more thing I want to show you, because I've showed you the Create Crafts satin board. Didn't give me a nice result. And somewhere, amongst this pile of pieces of foil, I've got some Crafter's Companion satin finish card. It's only a small piece. What have I done with it? So many pieces of card. Yeah, I even thought yesterday, I thought craft card won't work. It worked. How do you do this? A bright pink piece of card. Bear with me. Okay, I've just got 3 more I want to show you. So this lovely piece of card, which is what I was searching for, is nearly the same colour as my tablecloth. This is a Crafter's Companion satin board. This is different to the Create and Craft one. I know for experience that this falls really nicely, so I just want to show you that. I've also had some lovely results using Crafter's Companion silver satin board. Do that with a gloss silver foil on it, and that looks really lovely. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with just 4 shims. That's in there. Back in a moment. Oh yeah, that takes foil really beautifully. Okay, so that was that one. That's just warming up. So I've got this. I bought this on Chanda in their craft price drop. It's a packs of pearlized card. This one's a kind of a deep gold yellow, but it came in all sorts of colours. I'm really not sure how this is going to fare, so we'll give it a try, see what happens. So, foil, card, shims, sure the colours go, but that's foiled quite nicely onto there. I could certainly imagine foiling onto the other colours. This one would probably look nice in a red. Okay, that's that one. And finally, I've got some Ivory Card that feels very much the same as my very smooth white card that I use. But I know that I get different results, so I wanted to just show you that. Because you can't always judge a card just by how it feels. So, foil, card. I'll use my 4 shims again. I'll see if that one works as well. Now this is a cardstock that has caused me lots of problems. I did a whole video on making a card with this cardstock, and the background had foiled okay, and then I came to do the sentiment and I couldn't get it to foil nicely, and it still doesn't. I actually ended up having to make it part 2 of my video and foil my sentiment onto some different card. Because no matter what I tried with this, I just can't. Some places it's really lovely, and then others it goes patchy, and it is the card. It's not anything I'm doing on the Gopress. It really is the card that makes the difference. So I've got all sorts of things here. As I say, people ask me what's the best card for foiling onto. Well, it really depends what you want to be doing with what you're foiling, and my answer to that would be, well, go for your stash with the card that you've got and test it. And if you think, oh, I'd like to do a foiled sentiment on that card for this project, take a small piece. You don't have to do the whole sentiment. Take a small piece of card and a small piece of foil and try it out. There is no substitute. There are too many millions and millions of varieties of cardstock and paper and other materials that you might want to foil onto for somebody to have tested them all and told you they're okay. Because it will depend on the hot foil stamps you're using, how many shims you've got, cardstock you've got. You need to make sure you've let your hot foil stamp warm up properly. As I say, there are too many variables, so always make sure your hot foil stamp has had time to get hot, and if it's a bigger one, if it's a big whole plate one, don't just wait for the light to go green. Wait for it to go back to red a couple of times and come back to green a couple of times to make sure that plate really has thoroughly heated through before you start trying to use it for foiling. And again, test small areas and make sure if you're doing a test the area in the middle, because that will be the last bit that warms up. Okay, so that's my offering for today, kind of a troubleshooting how to test. We've been here for 1 hour and 10 minutes, would you believe? And I've used maybe a foot of foil and lots of little pieces of card, most of them from I keep a packet of offcuts, so I've not wasted lots of card. I've used my offcuts for my testing, and that's what you need to do. You need to take the card that you've got, figure out if there's, by adding some more shims and by making sure your hot foil stamp's warmed up, see if you can get it to take the card nicely like it did here. Okay, and if when your die cutting machine is feeling quite stiff and it's still not foiling right, you know it's the cardstock. Try some different cardstock. Okay, I would, if you're new to using the Gopress, make sure you use Couture Creations foil. It is the most consistent, designed to work at the temperature that the machine works at with the pressures you get through your die cutting machine. So if you're using foils that you bought on eBay or other places on the internet, Todo foils are similar specification to the Gopress ones, but other foils might be different. They might work on some card and others, and they might need more pressure or less pressure. They might work with some hot foil stamps and not others. And then when you introduce things like foiling with embossing folders and other techniques, that's a whole different range of pressures that you're working with. Okay, so there's my offering. Hopefully it's been useful. Thanks for watching.